Welcome back to the deep dive. If you joined us last time, you know we're working our way through the lean startup.
Yeah, digging into the core concepts.
Exactly. So today we're tackling two really foundational ideas. First, who actually is an entrepreneur according to this way of thinking? And second, this crucial concept, validated learning. What does that actually mean in practice?
It's absolutely key. So again, we're drawing from Eric Ries' book, The Lean Startup.
Right.
And the mission really is to pull out the essentials on these 2 points for you. Give you a solid grasp without getting bogged down in every single detail.
Get the big picture and how it actually works in the real world.
That's the idea.
Okay, so when we hear that word, the typical image, maybe pops up, someone starting out in a garage.
Right, the classic Silicon Valley trope.
Yeah, but the book really challenges that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It broadens the definition quite a bit.
It does, significantly. Ries defines a startup very intentionally. He says it's a human institution designed to create a new product or service under conditions of extreme uncertainty.
Okay, extreme uncertainty. That feels like the operative phrase there.
It really is. It shifts the whole focus. It's less about what kind of company it is.
Like size or funding.
Exactly, and more about the environment it's operating in. Is it venturing into the unknown?
Which leads to a really interesting implication the book raises. It argues that basically in any modern company that relies on innovation.
Which is most of them now.
Right. Entrepreneur should almost be seen as a job title, a necessary function within the organization.
Precisely. And this is where the idea of intrapreneurs comes in. People acting like entrepreneurs, but inside a larger company.
Ah, yes, the entrepreneur. The book uses a great example for this, the SnapTax team at Intuit.
It's a really illustrative case.
Because here you had a team, inside this big successful company. Intuit, they had salaries, resources.
Regular offices, not a garage.
Definitely not a garage. A far cry from that stereotype. But the book insists, no, they were entrepreneurs. Why?
Because of that uncertainty factor again. They were creating something totally new, SnapTax.
Right, a mobile tax filing app.
And they were doing it under really uncertain conditions. They were, in effect, competing with Intuit's own huge product, TurboTax.
So success wasn't guaranteed at all, even with Intuit's backing.
Not by a long shot. They were navigating uncharted territory for the company.
So the innovation, the uncertainty, that's what made them entrepreneurs, despite the corporate setting.
Exactly. And it's interesting how their leadership seemed to get this. The executive sponsors, they gave the team what Ries calls an island of freedom.
An island of freedom. I like that. What did that mean practically?
It meant autonomy. They protected the team from some of the usual corporate bureaucracy, the slower processes that can sometimes kill innovation.
Okay, so they could experiment, move faster.
Yeah, adapt quickly, like a startup needs to. And it's also worth noting they started small, just, I think, 5 people initially.
Wow, only 5. So it shows that even internal innovation doesn't need a giant team from day one.
Right. Lean principles apply there, too.
So the takeaway for you listening is, if you're working on something new, a new product, a new service, even inside a bigger organization,
you might be playing that entrepreneurial role, these lean startup ideas. They're likely relevant to you.
Definitely broadens the scope. Okay, so we've got a handle on who the entrepreneur is. Let's shift to the next big piece, learn. Specifically, validated learning.
This comes up early in the book, in the vision part. It's presented as really fundamental.
But it's not just like reading articles or general learning, is it? It sounds much more rigorous.
Oh, absolutely. It's very specific. Validated learning isn't just gathering data. It's proving hypotheses.
Proving them? How?
It's about learning the empirical truth about your strategy. Which parts are actually working, which parts aren't.
Okay, empirical truth. So based on evidence.
Yes. Demonstrated by positive, measurable changes in your core metrics. It's not about good intentions or just working hard. It's about seeing real results that validate your ideas.
That contrasts sharply with the old myth, right? The one the book kind of debunks in the intro, that if you just work hard enough, persevere like crazy, success is guaranteed.
Exactly. Ries talks about seeing startups fail despite incredible effort because they weren't learning the right things or weren't adapting based on what they learned.
So given that entrepreneurship is about building something sustainable under all that uncertainty we talked about, validated learning is basically your navigation system. It's how you find your way through the fog.
That's a great way to put it. It's about figuring out what customers really want and that's often different from what they say they want.
Or what the entrepreneur thinks they should want.
Absolutely. And critically, it's about discovering if the path you're on actually leads to a viable, sustainable business.
But I can see how initially saying learning is your main measure of progress might feel a bit fuzzy.
Yeah, it can seem intangible compared to, say, revenue or number of users.
Wait, we learned something important this week, but we didn't make any money. Is that really progress?
The book acknowledges that skepticism. It can feel counterintuitive at first, but the IMVU story Ries tells that really crystallizes why this kind of learning, especially learning from what doesn't work, is so vital.
Ah, the IMVU example,
Yeah.
right? They had an initial strategy that, well, it didn't quite pan out as expected.
Not even close initially. It's a powerful case study in testing assumptions. Their first idea was for an instant messaging add-on.
An add-on, meaning
Meaning it would work with the existing big IM networks, AIM, MSN Messenger, Yahoo Messenger back then.
okay, so piggybacking on existing user bases.
Right. Their thinking was, people already use these networks. They probably won't want to switch entirely. So let's create an add-on that brings in our cool 3D avatars and virtual goods and make it interoperate. Then people can use it with their existing friends, and hopefully it spreads virally from there.
That sounds logical on the surface. What were the core assumptions baked into that?
Well, several key ones. First, that customers would be resistant to switching IM providers. Second, that learning a whole new interface would be a big hurdle.
Okay.
And third, that the primary driver for adoption would be connecting with your existing friends on the platform. That was crucial for their viral growth model.
Got it. So based on those assumptions, they built the product.
They did. They invested a lot of effort in building this quite complex add-on product, making it work with multiple networks.
Which probably involved compromises.
Oh, yeah. Lots of technical compromises to hit deadlines. And the result was, frankly, a pretty low-quality, buggy first version.
Okay, so they get this first version out. Then comes the moment of truth, putting it in front of actual potential users.
And this is where the concept of validated learning really hits home, because their assumptions started to crumble almost immediately.
What happened?
There's this key anecdote Ries shares about an early user interaction. They were watching someone use the product, and they asked her if she would invite one of her friends to try it. And she hesitated.
Hesitated. Why?
She said she wasn't sure if the product was cool yet. She was worried about, like, her own reputation if she recommended something lame to her friends.
Wow. Okay. That's not what they expected.
Not at all. It hit a core assumption about viral adoption head on. It wasn't just about technical function. It was about social risk, perceived coolness, things they hadn't really factored in.
That one interaction must have been a real eye-opener. Was it just that one thing?
No, that was just the start. They kept seeing disconnects. For instance, they tried to get users engaged by having them customize their 3D avatars before connecting with anyone.
Kind of a single-player experience first?
Yeah, for a product that was meant to be social, and users just weren't doing it. They weren't engaging the way the team thought they would.
So the user behavior just wasn't matching their internal model.
Not at all. It took more interactions like this, more failed attempts to get traction for them to face the really painful truth that the fundamental concept, the add-on strategy, was flawed, deeply flawed.
Ouch. After all that work building the complex interoperability.
Exactly. But here's the critical part. That period of failure, of things not working, generated immense validated learning.
Okay, so what did they learn?
They learned some surprising things that totally contradicted their initial hypotheses.
Like what?
Well, first, they found out potential customers actually did want a standalone IM network. They weren't necessarily tied to the old ones.
Oh. So the assumption about switching being a barrier was wrong.
Wrong for their target early adopters, yeah. These users often used multiple IM programs anyway. Learning a new one wasn't the big deal they thought it was.
Interesting. What else?
They also learned that, contrary to being hesitant, these early users actually kind of enjoyed the challenge of bringing their friends onto a cool new thing.
So being the first one on the block was appealing?
Seemed to be, yeah. And maybe the biggest learning. They discovered many users weren't primarily interested in connecting with their existing friends on IMVU.
Really? Then what?
They wanted to meet new people. And the 3D avatars, the virtual world aspect, turned out to be really well suited for that purpose, making new connections, exploring identities.
Wow, that's almost the complete opposite of their initial assumption about leveraging existing social graphs.
Almost a 180. So through all these bumps and failed experiments, by watching what users actually did, they learned the truth about their market. That's validated learning in action.
And the flip side of that, which the book points out, is that anything they did that didn't contribute to that learning,
Yeah,
that was waste.
precisely. Like all the effort building interoperability for, say, 3 different IM clients, maybe they could have learned the same core lesson that the add-on idea was flawed by just trying it with one client.
Right, saving a lot of time and resources. It forces you to think about the most efficient way to learn.
Mm-hmm. And Ries poses this really provocative question based on the IMVU experience.
Yeah.
Could they have learned how flawed their core assumptions were even sooner? Maybe even without building the whole complex product. Perhaps just by, like, describing the proposed product and features clearly to potential users, engaging their reactions, testing the concept before writing tons of code.
That really flipped the build it and they will come idea on its head. Test the core value proposition first.
It's a fundamental lean startup principle. The real story of IMVU, the path to their eventual success, didn't start with their initial flawed assumptions. It started with the hard work of discovering what customers really wanted and then pivoting, adjusting based on that validated learning.
Okay, so wrapping this up for today. It seems clear that the lean startup view of an entrepreneur is much wider, encompassing anyone innovating under uncertainty.
Yep, inside or outside big company.
And validated learning isn't just a nice to have, it's the absolute core mechanism for navigating that uncertainty. It's about scientifically testing your ideas against reality.
Using real customer behavior as your guide. It's about proof, not just belief.
The IMVU example really drives that home. How understanding what doesn't work can be incredibly valuable, maybe even more valuable early on than small successes based on wrong assumptions.
Absolutely. Failure in that context isn't the end. It's data. It's learning that prevents you from scaling the wrong thing.
So the key takeaways: entrepreneurship is broad. Validated learning is your empirical guide through the fog.
Couldn't have said it better. The IMVU story is just such a powerful illustration of learning the hard way, but learning nonetheless.
Definitely. So here's a final thought for you to consider. Think about your own work, your own projects. What are the biggest underlying assumptions you're making?
Good question. The ones you haven't really tested yet.
Exactly. And how could you apply some of these validated learning principles, maybe in a small way, to test those assumptions before you pour huge amounts of effort or money into them?
It's worth pondering. And of course, there's much more depth in the lean startup itself if you want to explore further.
For sure. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Always a pleasure.